I was in Fiji, trying to book a boat trip, which historically hasn't required an income assessment. But that was before I discovered the magical world of holiday sales presentations. We were walking around Port Denarau looking for things to do, when we came across what we thought was a tourist information booth. You know the kind of place: brochures, smiling people, photos of boats, and the general promise that if you hand over some money, that boats will be involved in some way. They offered us a discounted cruise. And now I'm many things, but I'm definitely not immune to the words discounted cruise. There was one catch. We had to attend a presentation. At the time it seemed annoying but not alarming. Sit through a presentation, get a cheap trip, carry on with the holiday. It felt like one of those tourist deals where the catch is obvious, but somehow convince yourself you're beating the system. Which is always a strong start. We paid a deposit, filled out some details, there were some income questions. The next day a minibus was sent to our resort to take us to Club Wyndham in Denarau Island. We arrived at the resort, waited in the reception, we were offered tea and coffee, there was a welcome song. Now, to be clear, the welcome song wasn't the weird thing. That is part of Fijian hospitality and culture, and it was absolutely lovely. But the strange part was everything around it. Because the day before, all I had tried to do was book a boat trip. And now I'm sitting in this really nice, fancy resort, waiting in this reception, being offered tea and coffee, waiting to be assessed for a sales presentation. Then the rep came over, and that's when things got even weirder. Because after all that, we didn't even make it into the presentation. We were disqualified from the sales pitch, which is a very specific kind of rejection, not professional, not romantic, worse. They looked at the income information, interpreted the currency differently than how it had been entered, and then decided we didn't qualify. I pushed back because by this time I was invested in being advertising too, but they weren't having it. They refunded the deposit and we left. So that was it. No presentation, no resort tour, no dramatic sales room, no manager appearing from behind a curtain with a clipboard and a dream. Just a failed attempt to attend a pitch for something I wasn't even planning to buy. And for a while, I thought the question was obvious. How can they afford to give away free things? Discounted cruises, free holiday stays, gift cards, meals, resort credits. Why would a company spend money just to get people into a room? So I started researching timeshares. And the annoying thing was, the answer wasn't as simple as because scam, which would have been convenient, less paperwork. Because timeshares are not some tiny dodgy industry operating out of a damp office behind a printer. They're sold by major hospitality companies. They are legal, they are regulated. Some people own them, some people use them, enjoy them, and even get value out of them. Which makes the story more interesting. Because if the product is legal, regulated, and sometimes valuable, why does the sales process stir so many complaints, warnings, Reddit threads, government guidance documents, and people saying things online like, "Do not make eye contact with the booth people"? This is not a direct quote, but spiritually it is everywhere. So the question becomes less about whether timeshares are good or bad, and more about the system that actually sells them. The more I looked into it, the more I realized the booth in Fiji was not random. It was the entrance. Timeshare companies have a very specific problem. They're not selling something that most people wake up and decide to buy. Nobody rolls out of bed on a Tuesday and says, "You know what would improve my life? A long-term holiday ownership product with annual maintenance fees and a booking system I will later need 3 spreadsheets to understand." So before a timeshare company can sell the product, they first have to find the customer. And that's where the free gift comes in. The presentation was not the product. Even the resort was really not the product. The first product was my attention. In the industry, people approaching tourists are known as OPCs, which can mean off-property contact or outside public contact. Tourists are approaching areas where they're already making holiday decisions. Tourist centers, resort areas, attractions, shopping centers, places where someone's already relaxed, spending money and already in the holiday thinking mode. And usually the offer sounds so simple. Come to a presentation, receive something valuable. A cruise, a gift card, hotel stay, a meal, a discount. It's not framed like an ad, it feels like a deal. And that's important, because most advertising has to fight for your attention. This system buys it. At first, I kept asking the same question. How can they afford to give away free holidays? How can they afford to give away discounted trips? How can they afford to give gifts away to people for just walking through the door? Then I realized something. I've been working in digital marketing for years, and I realized I was asking the wrong question. The question is not how much does the free thing cost? The question is how much does it cost them to acquire one customer? That is where the whole thing started to make sense. Because in marketing, a free gift isn't generosity, it's a customer acquisition cost. If a company spends money to get someone in a room, and enough of those customers become long-term, then the gift is not a loss, it's a part of the cost of sales. And once you start looking at vacation ownership through that lens, the whole system starts to change shape. Public company filings don't talk about this like a weird tourist hustle. They talk about tours, contract sales, sales volumes, financing owner upgrades, and something called a VPG, volume per guest, which is not a phrase normal people use because normal people are trying to enjoy their holiday. But to these companies, it matters. VPG is basically a way of measuring how much sales volume each completed tour generates. And there is where the numbers become useful. In 2024, Hilton Grand Vacations reported more than 835,000 tours. Not website visits, not brochure views, tours, sales presentations. Those tours helped generate about $3 billion in contract sales. Hilton also reported a VPG of $3,572 US. In plain English, each completed tour produced thousands of dollars in sales. Now that is sales volume, not profit. That distinction matters. But the scale is still important. Hilton also reported about $1.459 billion US in sales and marketing expense, net. So if we do some rough marketing math, that works out about $1,747 US in sales and marketing costs per completed tour. That's not a perfect customer acquisition cost. Public filings don't really give us that too clearly. It includes much more than gifts, sales teams, marketing programs, commissions, incentives, locations, the whole machine. But that is exactly the point. The machine is expensive. And the machine exists because each completed tour is valuable. Travel Plus Leisure Co., which includes Club Wyndham, reported the same kind of language in 2024. 716,000 tours, $2,293 billion US in gross vacation ownership interest sales, and a VPG of $3,094 US. Again, the same pattern appears. Tours, sales volumes, VPGs, not free holidays, not gifts, completed presentations. So suddenly the discount cruise looks different. It is not the product, it is not the mystery, it is a line item in an acquisition machine. To the customer, it's come get a free thing. To the business, it's how many qualified tours did we generate and how much sales volume did each tour make. That is not a holiday giveaway, that's a funnel. And yes, I know calling it something like a funnel makes it sound like I'm about to start a LinkedIn post. Here are 5 things Timeshare taught me about B2B growth. I promise I'll try not to. But it really is the right model. A tourist becomes a lead becomes a qualified prospect becomes a presentation attendee becomes a buyer, and a buyer may become a long-term customer. That is why the qualification matters. That is why the income questions mattered. That is why they wanted to know if we met the criteria before spending the time giving the presentation to us. Because the presentation is not free to the company. They have to transport people, host them, staff the sales room, pay commissions, provide incentives, and spend time with people who will probably just say no. So they don't just want tourists, they want tourists who can buy. That is why my failed qualification was weirdly useful. At the time it felt like a mistake, but in hindsight it revealed a part of the machine. They were not just inviting anyone into the room, they were filtering. Which raises the next question, what happens if you do qualify? I never got the full presentation, I never got the resort tour, I never got the full pitch, which is disappointing because I don't often get rejected by salespeople while trying to be advertised at. So I started reconstructing what would happen if I did make it through. And this is where the accounts started to line up. Official company terms often describe these presentations as lasting 90 minutes to 2 hours. Consumer guidance warns that they may involve resort tours, beautiful imagery, multiple staff members, waiting between stages, same-day offers, and pressure to not leave without making a decision. Sales training material and industry training companies describe structured processes such as meet and greet, warm-up, discovery, tour, pitch, money discussion, close. And online accounts from Reddit to travel forums to journalists who've all attended the presentation described a similar sequence. You arrive, you check in, you may be offered food or drinks, you may get a tour, someone asks you about your holidays, your family, your travel, your habits, your dream destinations. The product is explained, the numbers appear, then the offer appears. Then a manager appears, and sometimes a better offer appears. Then, eventually, if you stay long enough and say no enough, you may get the free gift, or you buy. And this is where it becomes important not to exaggerate. Not every presentation is the same. Not everyone describes a high-pressure experience. Some people go in, say no, get the free gifts, and leave. But enough sources describe the structure that it's hard to see as random. The room is not just there to explain the product. The room is there to convert a qualified lead. And once you see that, the psychology starts to matter. The presentation is not powerful because people are stupid. That is lazy. And also, as a general rule, any explanation that relies on everyone else except me is stupid is usually one bad decision away from becoming autobiographical. The better explanation is the environment is doing a lot of the work. The gift creates a certain sense of obligation. You've received something or expect to receive something, so the relationship is no longer mutual. The first yes is small. You stop at the booth, then you listen, then you give details, then you pay a deposit, then you agree to attend, then you accept the transport, then you sit down, then you fill out the forms, then you answer the questions, then you talk about your holidays, then you look at the resort, then you hear the offer. None of those steps feel dramatic by themselves, but together they create momentum. By the time the real decision appears, you've already spent time, attention, and part of your holiday. That is a sunk cost. Not because you were trapped, because leaving after 2 hours feels different from walking away at the booth. Then there is the resort. You're not sitting at home after dinner with the bank account open and a spreadsheet in front of you. You're on holiday, inside a resort. After being offered something, talking about future holidays, possibly looking at pools, rooms, beaches, and happy people who do not appear to be reading the terms and conditions, very suspicious behavior. The product is not introduced as paperwork. It is introduced as a future version of your life. Then the price is framed. A large number may appear first, then a smaller package, then a finance option, then a monthly repayment. Once a big number is on the table, every smaller number can start to feel reasonable. This doesn't mean it's good value. It means the comparison has changed. The urgency appears. Offers that are only available today. Deals that will not be there tomorrow. Bonuses if you sign now. Suddenly the question is no longer, do I want this? And it becomes, am I about to miss this deal? That is a different question, and that's the point. The gift does not need to make you buy, it only needs to make the first yes feel harmless. From there, the system does the rest. But the biggest shift happens after someone says yes. Because the sales presentation is temporary. The agreement is not. The presentation lasts 2 hours. The contract can last for years. That is where the story changes. Before the purchase, the product is presented as holidays, memories, future trips, family times, and all of the lovely things people want from travel. After the purchase, it becomes a financial relationship. There may be an upfront cost. There may be finance. There may be annual maintenance fees. There may be booking rules. There may be exchange systems. There may be cooling off periods. There may be resale issues. There may be an entire secondary industry wanting to help get people out, some of which has its own scam warnings. So the product becomes a lot more complicated after the emotional decision has already been made. This is one of the key tensions. With a normal holiday, you don't normally pay for the accommodation, if you haven't booked it, that is. With vacation ownership, the fees can continue regardless if you use it or not. That doesn't automatically make it bad. Lots of normal things keep charging you whether you use them or not. The modern economy is basically built on forgotten subscriptions and mild shame. But with timeshares, the stakes can be much higher. The purchase can involve thousands, sometimes tens of thousands in upfront costs. Finance can last for years. Maintenance fees may increase and resale can be difficult. This doesn't mean nobody should ever buy. Some owners do get value. That is important. Some people understand the system, travel regularly, book early, use their points well, and feel the product works for them. Some prefer the certainty. Some like returning to familiar resorts. Some bought resale rather than direct to avoid the high upfront cost. Some simply like that it forces them to take a holiday. And honestly, forcing yourself to take holidays is probably healthier than forcing yourself to read 120 pages of timeshare research. Although here we are. So far the conclusion is not timeshares never work. The fair conclusion is a product that may work for some people is often sold in an environment that may not be ideal for making a complex long-term financial decision. That's the mismatch. The sales experience is short, emotional, and intimate. The product is long-term, complex, and financial. And that mismatch is where the complaints live. So then you might ask, surely this is regulated? And yes, it is. The industry is not unregulated. That'd be too simple. And sadly, the truth has paperwork. Fiji recognises timesharing schemes within its managed investment scheme framework. Australia treats timeshares as managed funds, with licensing, product disclosure, calling off rights, and ACIC guidance. The United States has FTC consumer guidance and state-level cancellation rights. New Zealand has consumer protection laws around misleading conduct and unfair practices. There are always complaint pathways. There are always disclosure documents. There are always calling off periods. There are industry codes. There are consumer warnings. There are protections. The problem is timing. Most protections become useful after the moment where the customer needed the clearest thinking. Disclosure helps you read and understand it before signing. Calling off helps if you realize quickly enough. Consumer law helps if you can prove it was misleading. Complaint systems help after something has gone wrong. Chargebacks may help with fraud or non-delivery, but not simply because you change your mind. Travel insurance may protect the holiday, but it probably does not protect you from a financial decision you voluntarily signed while on holiday. Because a timeshare contract is not lost luggage. Although after reading some of this paperwork, both can produce a similar emotional response. The issue is not that there are no rules. The issue is the rules that sit around the sales process that creates the decision very quickly. A tourist may be from New Zealand, approached in Fiji, offered a South Pacific product, interacted with by an international brand, and signing documents governed by another legal structure. The pitch is simple, the protection is not. So where does that leave us? This began as a weird holiday story. A booth, a discounted cruise, a deposit, a minibus, a resort reception, a singing welcome, an income form, and then somehow failing the entry requirements for a sales pitch. But the more I looked into it, the less weird that moment became. It was not weird because the system malfunctioned. It was useful because the system became briefly visible. The booth was customer acquisition. The gift was cost of attention. The income questions were qualification. The presentation was conversion. The resort was lifestyle farming. The finance made the purchase feel reachable. The contract made the relationship long-term. The annual fees keep the relationship going. The resale problem made leaving harder than entering. And regulation tried to manage the risk after the sales model had already created the decision point. This is the machine, not a conspiracy, not mind control, not every salesperson being evil, not every owner being miserable. Just incentives stacked in a very particular order. And once you see the order, the whole thing starts to make sense. The vacation ownership industry spends money on free gifts, free trips, presentations, because those 2 hours can be worth far more than the incentive that got you there. A tourist becomes a lead becomes a qualified prospect becomes a presentation attendee becomes a potential buyer, a buyer becomes an owner becomes long-term revenue. That's why the industry can afford free things, because they were never really free things. They were part of an acquisition cost. The real product was not the cruise, it was not the coffee, it wasn't the gift card. It was a chance to sit a qualified person in a room and sell them a long-term holiday product while they were already imagining future holidays. And that's the real issue. Not simply that timeshares exist, not that some people regret buying them, not that even some presentations are high pressure. The real issue is the gap between the way the product is sold and the way the product may be understood. Because to understand timeshare properly, you need more than the version presented to you in the room. You need time to look at the documents, the full cost, the finance terms, the annual fees, the booking rules, and what resale actually looks like. You also need to answer one very unromantic question. Does this fit the way I actually travel? Not the way I imagine myself traveling while sitting in a resort on holiday, because those are very different people. Holiday you is optimistic, spreadsheet you has follow-up questions. And that's hard to do in a sales presentation, especially one you attend because they offered you a free thing. So no, I don't think the simple lesson is, no, never go to a timeshare presentation. Although personally, I've never technically survived one. I was removed at the tutorial stage. The better lesson is this. If a company is willing to spend money to get you into a room, it is because that room is worth something. And if the room is worth something, it's worth asking why. Because sometimes the free holiday is not the gift. Sometimes it is the receipt. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, please make sure you do subscribe. I am trying to do this YouTube thing. I would really appreciate it. I spent a lot of time researching this one. I'm going to be making content about all sorts of things I find interesting. I do have another video out. It is about the New Zealand football pyramid, so click somewhere on the screen for that. Bye for now.